Yo, married to greatness. Now, in this video, I'll be speaking about the differences between the person and the self, which was mainly derived from Ancient Kemet wisdom. This information was fundamental in terms of understanding who I was from my own spiritual journey and spiritual cultivation, and I was able to really utilize this knowledge alongside other practices such as semen retention to really get to know myself. So as always, it'll be good to know your thoughts, so let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you like this message, hit a thumbs up and subscribe. There'll be a lot more content coming your way. So let's fix the agenda. So for the agenda for today, we'll be speaking about the fundamental differences between the person with the self. We'll then follow on from that with the consequences of people or human beings identifying with the person, and then steps in terms of how we can move forward with it, because it's all well and good having the information, but how do you move forward with it? How do you apply that information? So just for a bit of context, when we're looking at the different spirits of a human being, the people of Ancient Kemet really understood and really dedicated their life to try and reconnect with their true source also. So also for the people of Ancient Kemet was that divine spirit, that higher spirit, God in a sense. And for them, especially when they were able to understand that information, they devoted their whole life to reconnect with that true source. So they took it seriously. They really understood the importance of it and they dedicated their life to it. So that's the highest level of spirit within a human being also. The people of Ancient Kemet also understood that the lowest form of themselves, so the lowest form of their spirit, is in the form of an animal spirit. So compared to, let's say, Ausar is stillness, Ausar is everything but nothing, Ausar is God. And the opposite end of the spectrum is the animal spirit. So Ausar is more stillness, whilst the animal spirit is more movement. So you can see even emotions, energy and motion, it's more movement. So the people of Ancient Kemet also understood that the lowest form of themselves manifested in an animal, and essentially it was their life mission to then transcend from an animal into Ausar. If we move over to some fundamental definitions that will just help us really shape the conversation, we will look at the person, the self, and the individual. So the etymology of person is per, through, sun, sound. So through sound. And we can see that because let's say, for example, you are looking to meditate, more time than not, the music will be very peaceful, will be very relaxing. And that will enable us to be peaceful and relaxing. Or let's say, for example, you're in a dance and you're listening to drill or you're listening to DMX or whatever the case may be, that music might get you gassed, it might get you pumped. So we can clearly see that listening to different types of music can generally alter the mood of the person, because it's all vibrations, it's all frequency. So if the person is predominantly that animal spirit, that emotion, if a frequency hits that emotion, it will change it. That makes sense, it will change it. So if you look at the self, as described earlier, the self is primarily that manifestation of Ausar. Like I say, everything but nothing, complete stillness. And then if we move over to the individual is us primarily as human beings. So within us, we have that duality of both the person and the self. We have that duality of the person and the self. If we go over to some of the aspects of a person, these are some of the qualities that make up the person. So we can start with the emotions, and as most of us has seen, the emotions is primarily driven by that reptilian brain. So it's all about maximizing pleasure, minimizing pain. And if we really listen to that aspect of our reptilian brain, that will drive our behavior. So in the face of a potential danger, we most likely will be more self-preservation. And if there's an opportunity to feel happiness, we will go forward, even if it may cause us harm long term. We have our environment and our experiences. So this combination of our experiences and our learned behavior in our environment can be directly related to our own intelligence. So, this information is primarily driven by our memories and our learned knowledge. We have our personality, which makes up the person. So more time, most of us think that our personality is fixed. So for example, somebody could just describe themselves as, being fiery, for example, and that's just the way they are. We also have the imagination. So the imagination is a little bit of a different level than just, basic emotions, for example. But the imagination is still taking external components which already exist and then combining them into something different. So even though it is a form of creativity, and to some it could be, a form of genius, it's still being derived from the external. So it's still being derived from the person element of the individual. And then finally, we have the senses, which is, self-explanatory, everything, how we interact with the world. So, what we hear, what we taste, how we feel. So all of these qualities are attributes of the person element of the individual. If we move over to the self, so slightly different, like I say, it's that manifestation of Ausar. The self is primarily undefined. So it could be anything, but nothing at the same time. There's a level of oneness. So if you look at the diagram, you have that white light of Ausar, but through the prism, it can manifest into different colors. So that's the same example of, the sea and the icebergs. It's all from the same source, but just has different manifestations over time. It's pure peace, stillness, almost like a mummy. So at complete peace. So for example, if you meditate and then you just feel you're not doing anything, but you just feel at complete standstill, you're at complete peace. It's emotionless. So there aren't external events or external experiences that occur that can change the feeling of it. So it's emotionless. It has unlimited ability. So again, with the fact that it can manifest into different types of icebergs, the self is able to be anything. And it's pure joy, it's pure joy, it's pure love. So if we look at the differences between the person and the self, we can see, where a few issues can come up. So the person, of course, may have limited belief of achievements because the achievements are, or the ability to achieve is primarily derived from external education or knowledge and experiences compared to the self, where there's an unlimited potential of achievement. Limited belief of knowledge, again, due to education, learned behaviors, as opposed to the self, which is divine wisdom, which is primarily looking at how things connect internally as opposed to what you can see. The person has the personality fixed, whilst the self is undefined. And then finally, the actions are dictated by the emotions, like I say, really driven by that reptilian brain, as opposed to actions dictated by divine law. So what is right and what is wrong, even if it may cause you further harm in the future. Now, there are a few consequences to that if the individual identifies with the person element, or if the human being identifies with the person element. And the first one identified is in terms of the source of happiness. So the picture on the left is a man at peace, tranquility, at stillness, and the joy comes from within as opposed to what he has. However, if you look at the picture on the right, the man has become happy. He's showing joy based on what he's been able to buy with money, what he's been able to purchase. So now it becomes a thing where people start to value what they have instead of who they are. Because ultimately, from the right, on the picture on the right, that person element of the individual, that reptilian brain, that pleasure is just short-term, really, short-term pleasure. And that by purchasing a car at that time, he feels happy. But over time, he would then need to keep on purchasing more and more things to regain that dopamine hit. If you're limited, so the picture on the left is, somebody that's limited, that has a ceiling on what they think they can achieve. If you're limited, you're not really giving your full gifts to the world. You're not really giving your full gifts to the world, as opposed to the picture on the right, if it's unlimited potential, if you know you have a hidden genius inside of you, you can really impact the world and you can really give your gifts to the world. However, if you identify with the person, it's highly unlikely that you are either suffering maybe from fear due to your emotions, or like we were speaking about earlier, that limited capability to achieve, which can never be a good thing, especially from a mental health perspective, because if you identify with your person, your self-perceived value can constantly change. It can change from either what you have. So, I've bought this, I bought this and this makes me feel big, or I bought this and this may make me feel important. How you feel, at this time, I feel happy about myself, so I've got high self-worth. But at the same time, it can flip, because, for example, if you lose things, if you lose money, or you lose your job, or you lose friends, or whatever the case is, your identity is still linked to that, so it will become negative. So you'll have a negative self-perception or negative self-image, and that will become detrimental to your mental health, and that's never a good thing. As opposed to if you identify with your higher self, or that manifestation of Ausar, you know that it's a pure peace, pure joy, pure oneness, and that doesn't change. Now, the other problem is, for people that identify with their person, is the fact that a lot of people that are in government, a lot of people that are in the politics and run countries, or leaders of countries, are primarily driven by that emotion. So they primarily identify with the person as opposed to the oneness, and that's where you see corruption. So even if you look like in parts of Africa where deals with China are being done, which may be at the detriment of the people in Africa long term, you can start to understand that a lot of the leaders, unfortunately, identify with the person aspect, or are feeding into the person as opposed to the self. So the majority of the people, the masses, will suffer. And it's like, if you look at the people of Ancient Kemet, everybody wanted to ensure that they could transcend to Ausar. Nowadays in society, it's nothing like that. It's more about self-preservation, especially in this capitalistic type of society. Now, moving forward, so it's all well and good having that information. It's all well and good, us understanding, in an individual or in a human being, there's a difference between the person and the self, etc. But how do we really tap into the true self? How do we discard our identity, or how do we move on from our identity as a person? And for me, what really helped was meditation. Because the true self, the manifestation of Ausar, is pure stillness. So for me, meditation and being able to tap into that little voice in the back of your head and really listen to it was key to remind myself on a daily basis that I am not, the sum of my experiences. I'm not, my emotions. I'm beyond that. My true self never changes. It's undefined, and it's of pure joy. So even in a scenario where, I've got an option to do something self-preservation or not be kind, I'll always choose to spread love. I'll always choose to be kind. And that's really helped because of the constant meditation and constant reminding myself of who I am, that constant positive self-talk. I also spend time in nature. So for me, spending time with nature really allowed me to reconnect. And this goes into the property of Ausar in terms of that oneness. So, nature has healing powers. And being there, being present, being still allowed me to realize and tap back into that true self, that self aspect of the individual, as opposed to the lower form, the animal self. And be awake, be present. Because a lot of the time we're snoozing. I'm not gonna lie to you, a lot of the time we're on autopilot. So for example, we are not actually present. We're not really thinking. We're sleepwalking. So for example, if you know you're trying to be healthy, if you know that you're trying to get your diet in check, and you go to, let's say, your local supermarket, and you're not really thinking, you might just buy a snack because your animal brain is telling you, one little chocolate bar won't help, one little chocolate bar won't help, what's the worst that can happen? That's an example of you are not really awake. Your reptilian brain is on autopilot, and that's doing all your thinking for you. But one thing that really allowed me to tap into that true self was be awake, be present, and make a genuine effort to do so. Make a genuine, deliberate effort to do so. And then over time, it does become easier. And then the final thing was around taking risks and pushing past your barriers. Because if we, go back to the person aspect of the individual, there was barriers, based off your knowledge, experience, etc. If you take risks and push past your perceived limit, you'll start to really understand that you can do anything. You can do anything, and that's because you're tapped into that higher self. You're tapped in, and you have unlimited potential. So just take risks. Leave fear alone. That's not even real. That's just your animal brain trying to save you. Leave fear alone and really take risks. Push past your perceived boundaries, and you'll start to really unlock that true self. But as always, it'll be good to know your thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section on what I've been speaking about. If you like this message, hit a thumbs up and subscribe. There'll be a lot more content coming your way. Have an amazing day. Love.